From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D4 Derek, there was an interesting development in basketball gaming this week, one we have to talk about, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, we want to talk about a new basketball video game that will be hitting the virtual hardwood in 2026. An NBA Street-inspired game called NBA The Run. We will be going over our first impressions as it relates to the announcement, the details, and our expectations. I also want to point out that recently 2 other basketball video games have entered the space, Andrew. NBA Bounce from Outright Games and Hoopland by Quality Games, which just recently got its Steam release. We love highlighting new games that enter the space, so we do want to dedicate episodes to each one of these games. So look out for a podcast talking about NBA Bounce and Hoopland. Also, Andrew, I want to point out, I've had many interactions with the developer of Hoopland. He is awesome, and we have to have him on the show at some point. Again, Hoopland is a ode to 16-bit classics. It has that 16-bit look. Looks like it could be on Super NES, but the depth of the game is something that you would see in 2025. Just as far as the gameplay depth with the moves that you can do, the button mapping, the fact that you can create leagues, create teams, and you have deep roster editing and stat tracking and all of that. Just blown away by the attention to detail on the game Hoopland. And yeah, would love to get the developer on the show soon.
We're going to have to see if we can set that up. Absolutely. It's a game we've been paying attention to. Originally came out on Android and iOS devices. We've been waiting for that PC release. It has happened, as you said, there in Steam Early Access. Also a demo, if people want to check that out. Integrated college and pro leagues in every single save. There's a lot of cool stuff, like you said, that mixture of modern mechanics, modern ideas with that classic aesthetic. So, yeah, I still have to pick it up. I haven't actually bought the full version yet, but been playing the demo. Just a great combination of modern ideas and modes and features with that classic aesthetic. A great throwback. We love that with the indie games, that marriage of the old and the new like that. So, yeah, that'd be great to get him on the show.
So let's get into our main topic, Andrew. NBA The Run. So I first found out about this with a post on Twitter from the main NBA The Run channel, where it states, "The game's about to change. Introducing NBA The Run, a brand new fast-paced arcade 3v3 street basketball game featuring NBA stars, iconic courts, and endless highlights. Coming in 2026 for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam on PC. Wishlist now." So gives you a link to wishlist the game. Really happy this is coming out on Steam. There's a mixed bag of reactions, and we're going to get into that a little bit later because this announcement also came with a trailer which showed some gameplay footage. I also want people to know that, dozens of episodes ago of the NLSC podcast, we talked about The Run Got Next, a new game that was also supposed to be released in 2026. It did not have an NBA license. It talked about unique characters, and it was, again, a strictly online game, just like this one. We're going to get into that in a second. But it looks like the developers at Play by Play Studios ended up actually getting that NBA license. So The Run Got Next is canceled, and now it's NBA The Run.
Yeah, exciting news. And what I do like about this, what I find very promising about this, is that the NBA license is clearly attainable for a smaller studio. And we've talked about that before with 2K signing that new deal for billions. And people have pointed this out in the Discord and in the forum, and it's a thought that occurred to us as well, that the deal obviously scales according to the profitability of the game, or the potential profitability of the game. Because obviously other developers have had the NBA license. Apparently, the NBA actually reached out to Play-by-Play Studios when one of the developers posted about the game on his LinkedIn. A representative from the licensing office at the NBA reached out and said, "Hey, let's talk," which is really cool. And of course, we've had NBA Playgrounds in recent years, Saber Interactive, not the size of a Take-Two, obviously, but it is good news that the NBA license is up for grabs, and of course not exclusive like the NFL license.
Let's see if 2K tries to get in on this like they did with NBA Playgrounds
stay
and
away.
try to talk play-by-play studios into becoming a part of this, because they're supposedly the keepers in the basketball
The exclusive
space.
home.
They're the exclusive home of basketball gaming. So I want to point out that there was a really well done article on ballislife.com about this announcement. And that's what we're going to be kind of dissecting here. And then we're going to go over our feelings about the footage that we saw, the trailer. So it states, exclusive, creators of NBA The Run sit down with Ball is Life. This article was written by Will Despart on October 29th, 2025. It starts, if you were one of those kids who spent an incalculable amount of time playing classic streetball video games like NBA Jam and NBA Street growing up, you have a reason to be excited about the latest development on the sports gaming front. Independent gaming outfit Play-by-Play Studios unveiled what they are calling the, quote, spiritual successor, end quote, to those generational hoops titles on Wednesday, releasing the first trailer for an officially licensed 3v3 PvP streetball game in partnership with the NBA and NBPA, featuring all the league's biggest stars. And then it shows a banner, basically. It says The Run, and it shows Greek Freak, Cooper Flag, Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, and LaMelo Ball. They are in their team jerseys, but they're also wearing some street swag. Pretty cool looking screenshot. The faces look amazing. The Anthony Edwards cyberface looks a lot better than what we're getting right now in NBA 2K games.
People noted that,
NBA
yeah.
2K26. Yeah. So yeah, graphics look great there. It continues, founded by CEO Scott Props in 2021. Play-by-Play Studios' creative team is anchored by longtime sports gaming developer Michael Young, who spent over 20 years with EA Sports working on games like NBA Street, SSX, and even Madden. So they have that experience in there, Andrew, right? And obviously, Michael Young is passionate about the games he has worked on and wants to bring an NBA Street-style game back. Young's history makes him the perfect person to lead a revival of the streetball gaming genre. Still, he insists that while NBA The Run is certainly a spiritual successor, it's also its own entity and not merely a remake of a nostalgic game from the past. He states, we definitely don't set out to make a remake. We look at modern games, and one thing we thought was missing was the fun, fast to play, easy to pick up, non-intimidating sports titles. You look back at games like Jam and Street, but And One largely influenced Street at the time. I think a lot of the gameplay we have on NBA The Run is over the top. It is about showmanship, but it's also about step backs, logo threes, alley-oops, and dunks. Basketball has evolved a lot since 2007, so let's throw this over to you. I'm sorry, I'd just like to say that alley-oops and dunks and players shooting from deep and step backs, that was still happening in 2007.
Yes.
And I would argue that the dunking and the amount of high flyers that we had in the NBA at the time was actually more. I understand he's trying to pump up the game, but I disagree overall with that statement. What do you think?
I mean, it does rub me the wrong way whenever I hear that stuff, and of course, now that makes you an old head, right? Stuck in the past, bitter about the current state of the game. But yeah, we don't need to throw the past under the bus like that. Like you say, though, I get where he's coming from, but yeah, that stuff's been around for a while.
Right. And not all evolution is great evolution, as we've talked about before. The amount of long-distance threes means also a lot of long-distance bricks in the NBA. Yeah. Now, we've talked about those percentages on the show before, you know, what people actually shoot when they shoot for more than 30 feet and whatnot. But I'm sorry, but I'd rather have an acrobatic layup or a sweet-looking fadeaway or, a throwdown or whatnot, either a flashy one or on somebody. So just my opinion. The article continues, a familiar setting. In an era of sports gaming where major studios have all but driven niche ideas into the ground in favor of their major simulation titles, Young likened his experience working on The Run with Play-by-Play Studios to the experience that he had making those classic streetball games with EA over 20 years ago. He states, with us being such a small team, it felt a lot like my days on NBA Street, where no one's necessarily paying attention to you and you're just making a game that you love. And the team's super passionate. A lot of the magic on NBA Street was the fact that everyone on the team was playing the game for fun every single day. And you love to hear that, right? And I totally believe him, because NBA Street's gameplay, the original NBA Street Volume 2, how fun were those games? Super pick up and play, great controls. I'm sure they had a blast testing, right, and competing in the studio. And that's kind of cool to hear.
Yeah, it's that creativity, those passion projects, those games that weren't necessarily going to be huge sellers. And I know the purpose of releasing any product is to make money. You need to have profitable products and all that. But it's not just about that when you are creating art. And we certainly feel that video games are art. I think there are many arguments in favor of that, and that's a whole other discussion, obviously. But those games, there was a lot of artistic mode in it, there was a lot of creativity, passion in those projects. And yeah, it does kind of harken back to those days, those stories that you hear from developers back in the day, where it was a small team just making these games that they were passionate about, not making something that's going to milk gamers for recurrent revenue, all of that nonsense, trying to be a blockbuster game, just this great, fun experience. Sometimes it feels like we've lost that in the AAA space. That might be an exaggeration. It's certainly in the indie space, that's where they're stepping in to make these games. But yeah, I do like to hear that.
I also like the point that he made about how, when they were working on this game and play testing and all of that stuff, they weren't being bothered. They were flying under the radar, right? This wasn't like a new NBA 2K game, right? Exactly. Or anything like that, where there was an expectation of previews. There was an expectation of this. Where's the news? All of that stuff. They flew under the radar during the major portions of the development cycle, and they're already at play testing now, and we just heard about the game, right? They're taking signups for playtesting. So they were able to just really focus on the creation of this game, what they wanted to put into it. Probably had a select few people giving feedback along the way, while not having to deal with any noise, right? Or expectations. I'm sure that went a long way with the development team.
Yeah, and again, that does sound like a throwback to classic video game development. These smaller teams just hunker down, making this fantastic game, not having to answer to the suits. Although I suppose that was always a thing with the bigger studios, EA, etc. But to his point, it didn't always happen with those smaller projects, those niche projects that weren't expected to make a lot of money, although some of them probably did become very successful. From memory, the NBA Street games did sell pretty well when it came down to it. NBA Street Volume 2 in particular, if I recall correctly. But yeah, it does kind of sound like a throwback to video games being created as art, as these fun toys, as these fun products to use, rather than what is going to be this major profitable product that is just going to push people to spend and be this blockbuster. We could compare it to the loss of the mid-budget comedy film in Hollywood. It's all about the blockbusters now, and not that mid-budget film, the ones that often became cult classics, or they had that popularity on home video and video rentals when they were a thing. So yeah, it's a nice throwback in that regard.
He continues, on some of the bigger games, it was tough to get 100 plus people who all love the sport and are playing the same game every day for fun. That's what we have. We have multiple play tests a week where Scott Props sometimes has to go, yep, well, we need to go back to work. People will ping each other on the weekend because we're having fun playing the game. Advantages of independence. One particular advantage to creating this game with an independent studio, as Props pointed out, was the increased creative freedom that comes with being a company that's still working to prove itself. Props knows Play-by-Play is filling some big shoes with this release, but he believes some of that pressure is alleviated by the fact that they are an independent studio. Scott states, we don't have a pre-existing franchise or set of rules that we have to adhere to. For us, I think what's really cool is we can take a lot of creative risk, given that if we work on a big franchise, there's a whole lot of built-in expectations about what the game should be, what it has to be to certain players, etc. It's very difficult. We know we've got really big shoes to fill. We don't take that lightly at all. But it's about how we can take that and think about modern games, bring that forward, and really embrace the creative risks we can take to offer the best possible game for players across the world. I do want to point out before I continue, and I think you will agree with this, no matter what this article says, no matter what Scott says, this is going to be compared heavily to NBA Street.
Of course.
Because people have been talking about wanting some sort of successor for the longest time. And any game that's come out, whether it be related to NBA Jam, at least since NBA Jam on Fire Edition, these NBA Street style or NBA Jam style games have been heavily compared and heavily critiqued. And each one has fell well short from so many of the classic NBA Jam or Street titles. So the bottom line is they do have the freedom to do what they want with this game. But at the end of the day, yes, it's going to be compared in a major way from a graphics perspective, animation perspective, mostly a fun perspective, to the NBA Street Series.
Yeah, we'll obviously dive into that when we talk about the positives and negatives, our impressions of the teaser trailer and the game in general, how it's shaping up. But that is what they want to do, obviously. Make a game that's a throwback to these classics, but at the same time do something new, but the comparisons are inevitable. And some people don't like that. I remember getting some pushback when I was comparing NBA Playgrounds to NBA Jam, and people saying, oh, it's a new game, you can't hold it to that standard. But my thing is, Derek, if you're releasing an arcade game today, it has to measure up to the arcade games of the past. It cannot be worse. It cannot feel worse than NBA Jam released over 30 years ago. You know, if that's the standard, you can't be worse than the 30-year-old game. That's the way it goes. And I will get into it more when we talk about our positives and negatives, but you do have to hit the same marks as those classic games. You need to follow the blueprint. Not exactly. You don't want to necessarily make it beat for beat, although I think with EA Sports NBA Jam, you obviously do need to follow that formula a lot more closely. They do have a bit more freedom here, but the basics, you need to nail the basics of an arcade basketball game, so you do need to take some cues from the classics.
Not only that, if you're going to advertise it as a spiritual successor to a classic, or it's going to be used in your advertising, or there's going to be articles written that states it is a spiritual successor. If you have people working on the game that maybe worked in the studio when those classics were originally released, et cetera, like this situation, then you get what you kind of deserve as far as comparisons, to be completely honest with you.
Expectations.
And I want to use an example of, I'm going to call it a flop. To be honest with you, with a game recently that compared itself to NBA Jam. So NBA Superstars by Raw Thrills, right? They did the right thing by getting Tim Kitzrow back on the mic, and he's awesome. And I've shared gameplay from NBA Superstars Arcade on YouTube, but it was being consistently called a new NBA Jam game, a spiritual successor to the Jam series, all of that. And the gameplay on that game is probably 5% as enjoyable or as good as NBA Jam 2010 or NBA Jam on Fire edition. It's also it's not as good as the 16-bit jams, Andrew. The animations themselves even are inferior. And I've played NBA Superstar Arcade multiple times. So, when I uploaded gameplay for it, there were a lot of critiques, whether it was on Twitter or whether it was on YouTube, etc. And that's because, listen, you want to call yourself a new Jam game, you want to call yourself a spiritual successor, try to be at least as good as one of the past Jam games, right? One of the classics. Get close, at least. And that game didn't.
Yeah, if you're going to invite those comparisons, then you can't complain that the comparisons are made, that you may come up short. You've invited that by saying you're a spiritual successor. As you say, this is in the style of, this is a throwback to, this is the next generation, this is an evolution of those games. Yeah, you can't be inferior to a game that is decades old.
Yeah, and also the whole word evolution is thrown around so much. So many people use the word evolution, but it's not positive, right? The thing that they're calling an evolution isn't actually a positive. It's actually worse than what they're comparing it to. So that's also frustrating at times. Yeah. The article continues. Creating the game in an independent studio also lets the team streamline ideas without going through a formal board or a series of meetings. So additions and changes can be made and worked out as soon as they are noticed during playtests. Michael Young states, ideas come up, and we can turn them around really fast because we don't need to get 7 executives' approval to make a change. We can just try something, check it in, play it on the weekend, and go, yeah, we love this. A dream partnership. One instance of a decision that needed to be streamlined was on the morning of July 24th, 2024. One day after Play-by-Play initially revealed its plans to revive the streetball gaming genre with an unlicensed game called The Run, got next, on July 23rd. Props woke up to a LinkedIn message from an NBA representative that changed the entire trajectory of the project, and this is what you were speaking to earlier. He states, we originally announced the 3v3 PvP street-focused basketball game in July of 2024. We had been building that game for, 2+ years. At that point, for us, it was always about delivering the really cool 3v3 pick-up-and-play street-style game that felt authentic and real to the world of street hoops. We announced that game on July 23rd. On July 24th, I woke up and had a message in my LinkedIn inbox from somebody at the NBA saying, hey, would you guys be interested in potentially taking this game to the next level and partnering up with the NBA? Which dreams come true as a massive fan of the NBA and a massive fan of hoops games. It's like mind blown. According to Props, every NBA team and active player is licensed to appear in the game. That doesn't mean the game will feature the league's entire roster, but there are no real limitations to who could be included. Awesome, right? They got the NBA license. They're able to put the current players in the game. I haven't seen an announcement related to any classic players. I think that was one of the draws of a game like, say, NBA Street Volume 2, where you had the NBA stars, and then you had like the legends and whatnot, and you had Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Bill Walton, etc. And I think that the Legends touch would go a long way in a title like this, because oftentimes that's the footage that people want to show off, right? On social media, they want to show, a move they did with Kobe Bryant or Tracy McGrady or Vince Carter or Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Julius Erving, etc. And I know that you and I love to post that type of footage and put those classic players on the court. However, that must have been an amazing feeling, getting a message from an NBA executive stating, let's see if we can work on a license.
Yeah, it goes to show if you're developing something in the background, you have something good to go, then the possibility arises that the NBA is going to reach out for that partnership. Absolutely great news, obviously. And you're right, the Legends are such a big draw to any basketball game. You talk about NBA Street Volume 2 back in the day, absolutely the case. Of course, MJ being exclusive to 2K, Kobe, I believe, is exclusive to 2K as well, and Kareem. So there are going to be some that they probably couldn't include if indeed they do get Legends into this game, but it would be such a great idea. To your point, NBA Playgrounds did it too. That was great in Playgrounds as well. And the great thing about arcade basketball games is that you can have that smaller roster, that roster that's distilled down to the most exciting players to play with, the best players on each team. You don't have to have those full squads, especially if it's going to be 3v3. Having the 3 stars of the team to choose from, a couple of other interesting players to play with as well. That's what made arcade games so fantastic, so fun. And it's funny, you look at some of them. NBA Showtime is one, actually, because I was playing that recently, that you look at some of the rosters and some of the teams, they've added a few extra players that they probably didn't need to. Not necessarily the most exciting players to play with, although that was the lockout season, a transitional season for the league and some weird rosters. But yeah, that is the advantage of arcade games, that you can distill the roster like that.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's up in the air with this being an online-only game at release is how many players are you going to be able to use?
Sure.
Right? There's things that we're
unlockables,
Yeah, so we'll see. So the article continues. Bobito is back. While NBA The Run isn't directly in the lineage of the NBA Street Series, the new game will bring back one of the most iconic parts of the classic. Featured on commentary of a streetball video game for the first time in 2 decades is the legendary Bobito Garcia, one half of the iconic Stretch and Bobito radio show in New York City, and one of the figures at the forefront of streetball history. Michael Young states, I was fortunate early in my career to get to be part of a really tight-knit team on NBA Street Volumes 2 and 3, so I got to work with Bob a little bit back then. We didn't want this game to feel like a remake. We want it to feel fresh. But honestly, when you think about it, Bobito hasn't really appeared in a console game like this since 2005 on NBA Street V3. It was just exciting to think that there's going to be people who are going to love it from a nostalgic perspective. But there's a whole new generation. I think the enthusiasm and the fun he brings to the game will resonate with the kind of audience we're going after, which is younger than some people like us. So kind of like a hint of a whole like new generation evolution thing, but they're bringing back the voice of NBA Street Volume 2, which I think is the best street ball video game of all time, and stating, well, they'll still get excited about him, but it's a new generation. So like really what it is it doesn't matter what era you put him in, he's going to be great on the mic, right? For the audience. And it's going to be good for the younger crowd. It's going to be good for the older crowd. And it's really cool that they were able to get him to come back and do commentary for this game. Again, though, what does this do? This makes people draw more comparisons, right? It makes people, once again, compare this even more to like NBA Street Volume 2. So again, those comparisons are going to happen quite often.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword in that respect, but I do like that they're trying to go for the best of both worlds there, that they are trying to innovate, go for the new crowd, because you do need to appeal to everyone, or as many people as possible, the older gamers who have that nostalgia, the newer gamers who are going to really sink their teeth into this game. So I do think it's wise to bring him back. He obviously has that connection to street ball. I believe he's the MC at Rucker Park as well, on top of being a DJ and radio host, so it makes sense, and of course you do have that connection, but yeah, it does invite those comparisons once again.
Garcia also narrated the trailer, which was a welcome sight, or sound, for streetball fans across social media. Young states, "He just brings so much to our team. He's so easy to work with. The enthusiasm, the energy, the slang. You feel his passion in the game, and I think you feel it in the trailer, too." The article continues, "New Worlds. NBA The Run also features some of the most iconic streetball environments in the world, some of which Garcia suggested himself. Gamers will be able to transport themselves to iconic environments like Venice Beach in California, Lynn Park in Chicago, or even the Tenement in the Philippines. Quote, "Having been part of picking all the courts in the past street games, we'd go to all the courts and take photos and spend time there and play hoops there. I played in Venice Beach. I played Dykeman and played all over the place. I'm not good, by the way, but it's just a cool experience. Seeing courts like the Tenement with the famous LeBron James mural that put it on the map. We wanted to represent courts from all over the world. Research, I would say, is much easier to do on courts today than it was back then, because we would have to read books and travel. Now there's Instagram. When I made the street games, Dongdon wasn't even talked about, but now it's considered one of the most famous courts in the world." It continues, NBA The Run, more details. Play-by-Play hasn't committed to a price point or a release date for the upcoming game, though Props did say that the game wouldn't be sold at a AAA premium price. Props was also adamant that NBA The Run wouldn't just be a one-time release, and that Play-by-Play was committed to building on its partnership with the NBA and NBPA. "It's definitely not a one-time thing," Prop said. "I think we see this as something that can evolve over time and become something that's much bigger, that can engage fans on all kinds of different levels than what we see in the market of basketball today. I think there's a great opportunity to continue to expand there. There are all different kinds of directions that we can explore. So we don't see this as kind of a one-off. We see this as a long-standing partnership with the NBA, the NBPA, and I think we could really build a pretty compelling world that players can play in for a long time to come." So I love that. I love that it's not going to be at a AAA premium price, Andrew.
Yeah.
Not sure what they're going to price it at, but I'm going to guess US, maybe $30, $40, something around there as opposed to the normal 60, 70. I am expecting things like DLC to be part of the game. But again, there's been no announcement as it relates to that. It's so early in the game. But yeah, that will go a long way with fans if the game is reasonably priced.
So I have my list of positives and negatives that I'll go over shortly. And one of the potential negatives that I listed here was the price point, possibly, might not match the amount of content or the quality of the game. When I jotted that down in my notes, I wasn't aware that it was confirmed that it wasn't going to be a AAA price. So that's kind of alleviated that concern for me, actually, the price point being lower. Will it still be worth it at the end of the day? That remains to be seen, of course, but not releasing it at that AAA price point, I think, is a great decision out of the gate, much like NBA Jam on Fire Edition, although I do think that was a tremendous game, the best arcade basketball game, in my opinion, as I've said before. But releasing it at that lower price point, it does invite people to check it out, obviously, and it's not going to have the content of an NBA 2K, or even an 8th Gen NBA Live, for that matter, and we're going to get into that as well, obviously, it being an online-only PvP game. But yeah, releasing it at that lower price point is definitely the right move, and that strikes one potential negative off my list.
For example, and I talked about this long ago when I first tried NBA Superstars Arcade, that game would be laughed at if it was put on the store for $30 or $40.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The quality just isn't there. I think it's like a $10 game, maybe.
Yes.
15 at most. And it could do well on mobile. I think at a really low price point, people would pick it up on, the PlayStation Store, Xbox Store, or on PC, etc. But at the end of the day, that is not a $30 to $40 product. And you can see that by the footage that I've shared.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about NBA Bounce on a future show, as you said. And I was looking into that recently because I saw a link on social media that said it was 40% off on Steam. So I decided to take a look, and it's 40% off 73 Australian dollars. And that's not a full-priced AAA game, or close to AAA-priced game, NBA Bounce. So even at 40% off, it's still far more than I'm willing to pay. So I'm waiting for a much bigger sale when it comes to NBA Bounce. But again, to that point, not all games can charge that much.
Yeah, NBA Bounce, I looked at the footage. I've watched some gameplay. I haven't actually got my hands on the sticks, but I will be picking it up when it goes on a bigger sale. But yeah, it doesn't look like a $40 game to me. It looks very similar to a mobile game, to be honest with you, and the controls look very primitive overall, and I'm not seeing much depth there. In fact, from what I know of, there's no real NBA players in the game.
Nope.
There's fake players on each one of the NBA teams, or mascots. It's real mascots jerseys. And fake players. But yeah, hey, you got real jerseys worth that 40% off $40 price tag, I guess. But yeah, that seems like it's overpriced. And as a result, Andrew, how many people do you think have reviewed it, and how many people do you think have bought it? A very low amount. In fact, that game came out mid-September, I want to say, and I think there's only 5 reviews on the Steam page.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you deserve it for not, first off, doing a good job marketing your game, because I didn't even hear about it, right? And I'm all over this stuff and following all the channels and everything. I didn't even hear anything about NBA Bounce, really. And number 2, making it so your game is way overpriced and people picked up on it. So the article ends with one free throw. Props and play-by-play's desire to present the best game possible when it's time to release in 2026 is also why they haven't committed to a set release date yet, as Props wants to make sure the company makes a great first impression in the sports gaming world. And I admire that. I just want to point that out. That's what more companies should do. They make sure the product is complete and what people want before you release it. He states, "We feel like we've got one free throw and we want to make the free throw." Prop said, "We want to make sure we deliver a really awesome game. It's about being patient with the process, making sure this game plays, looks, and feels as good as possible. There's a particular feel that's hard to put into words, the way we want this game to feel when you touch it and interact with it and play with it. I think we just have to take our time to get to that place where we're so excited that we kind of have to put it out there and hopefully see the same level of excitement from players." So that's the article. I thought it was really well written. I thought the interviews were well done. So shout out to Ball is Life's Will Despart. Here's the deal. So we watched the trailer, right? And the trailer shows off some pretty cool graphics. I like the body models. I like the lighting. I like the way the likenesses looks, like the faces of the players. Like I said, Anthony Edwards is spot on. Doncic looks great. Steph Curry, they got all of their gear on, Andrew, like Curry's wearing the Currys, and they look the part, right? It looks great. But I want to touch really quick on the most important aspect of any sports game, the gameplay, right? And it was noted through a lot of the comment sections. I'm going to read one of the tweets that talked about it, and then some of the comments underneath. The comments that were made on the NLSC Discord when the footage was shared, all of that stuff. The gameplay looks incredibly stiff, incredibly rough. I'm not sure that's the way they wanted to come out with the trailer, but I don't think that that was a good first impression for a lot of the people. The way the players are stiff and throwing passes, the way their arms and legs move, or lack of movement with them, the way their players are standing and dribbling, and the way the alley-oop was thrown in the trailer. It looks honestly very much NBA Live 07 from the 360. To be completely honest with you, that's not good, Andrew. And we're just being honest here. We're excited for this game to hit the space. I want to point that out, but we are allowed to critique the footage that is shared. And you would think also that the developers want this feedback. But continuing, I'm worried because I played NBA Superstars by Raw Thrills. The game is super stiff. The animations don't look very good. It doesn't play well in your hands. etc. The ball physics are off, etc. It's just not a really good or fun game. So I think you had similar first impressions, but the animation quality, the stiffness, the ball physics, all of that, super underwhelming when it comes to that trailer.
Yeah, and you do want to make that great first impression. We've talked about the importance of that with NBA Live and how it's come back to bite NBA Live in the arse over the years, them not making that strong first impression when they really need to. And of course, there are games that play better than they look. I've really been enjoying NBA Live 18 and 19 the last couple of years, and they are two games that can look very rough in the footage, but they're very fun on the sticks. There are some frustrating moments, of course, but I do think they play a bit better than they look. Of course, when something looks good in those games, it does look pretty good. When it looks bad, it does look horrid. Unfortunately, that was a problem with Live. It is a problem with this trailer. It does make me concerned that it's not going to feel as good as advertised. It certainly doesn't look as good as advertised. But before I get into the trailer, I did want to respond to some positives about the news. And the first one, as I said at the top of the show, Derek, is that we're getting a new NBA license game. You know, the college basketball game from EA Sports fell through, or they pulled out when they weren't happy that they couldn't get the exclusive deal. So this excitement that we had over a new game, that was gone. That evaporated. And of course, with 2K, it's going to start out with the college DLC or the My Team content, so we're not as excited about that. So that was a shame. This is comparatively much more exciting news. Obviously, they want to pay homage to NBA Street. As we noted, that does have drawbacks, double-edged sword there, but that was a fantastic series, so that is good news. They have people who worked on that series, so they've got that insight there, they've got that passion. That's fantastic. The iconic street courts from around the world in the campaign mode, that reminds me a lot of the Streets World Tour in NBA Live 19, some of the same venues they mentioned. I really loved playing through that mode recently, so that is good news to me. I like that they're keeping the characters from the Run Got Next, mixing it with the NBA players, that they're going to have stories in their campaign mode, trying to make this living universe they've talked about, suggests a lot of replayability. Easy to pick up, rewarding to master. I love how they've said that. They're saying a lot of the right things about the gameplay. That is the core of arcade basketball gameplay. Easy to pick up and rewarding to master. The possibility of content being added post-release, the additional modes of play, they're not ruling it out. That is good. That is good to hear. We'll have to see what happens with that, but the fact that it's not being dismissed is promising. It's not ideal that games launch without features. That's all too common these days, but a game with promise can potentially grow into something better. With those expansions, just don't make it pay DLC. That would be really bad if they try and sell the single-player experience as pay DLC. And of course, they're looking to innovate instead of just being a quote-unquote nostalgic remake. And there is a downside to that, which I'll get to a little bit later, but on paper, that's admirable. So there are a lot of positives coming out of the announcement and the trailer.
I do want to point out, though, if you are going to charge $30 or $40 for a game, and I'm thinking it's going to be it's going to be around there, right?
I'd say so,
for this game. You can't make that online only.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's too high of a price point for that. I think that it's a major misstep to release this game with online-only features. And they're missing out on millions of potential buyers. And I'm not exaggerating there, millions of buyers. And I want to point out why. There's a lot of parents that grew up with these multiplayer games, the old NBA Jams, Street, all of that stuff, that want to boot this up and play with their kids. Right. There's one of our loyal listeners, VF Baller, who said yikes when he found out it was an online only game. And I don't think he's going to be picking this up. Why? Because number one, he doesn't like playing online. Number two, he has a son who loves basketball, right? A young son, and he wants to be able to jump on the sticks and play this game with him, and boom, that's out the window. Now he can't do that. He wants to have father-son time and create memories, as he should. The thing is that there's a lot of siblings out there that live together, or people out there that want to have their friends over to play these games as well. That is not extinct. Like that, the idea of that is not extinct. That's still a big thing. And there's been a lot of negative feedback that I've seen related to this being announced at this point as being released as an online only game. I think it's a major misstep. And guess who is not going to be putting time in this game more than likely because of this? me. Right? I want to be able to play a game like this with my two brothers. And now I'm not going to be able to do that. I also want to point out that I think the trailer in itself, based on that gameplay footage, the way it shows, I also think that was a major misstep. I know that they have time to work on it. I know that things could be smoothed out. I know that they're taking in feedback and there's play testing going on. The beautiful thing is that they're not on a timeline, right? They said 2026. They could release this at the end of 2026, right?
Sure.
If they want. If they want to push it back, they could always do that, etc. But at the end of the day, first impressions mean so much. And I think that the gameplay in that trailer was a major turnoff for so many people. And people are thinking, oh, this is just another cheap game entering the space, making all of these promises, and they think it's going to suck.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
I want to really quickly touch on this, and I want to throw it over to you for your negatives list. So Christopher London on X, at I am Chris London, he has over 400K followers, 447K.
Big creator, yeah.
Followers. Yeah. And he reacted to the trailer. Herb Scribner had tweeted, "Inbox, Play-by-Play Studios announces NBA The Run, a 3v3 basketball video game for consoles. Game launches in 2026, rated E." And Christopher quote tweeted this. Remember, almost 500K followers. And his tweet got over 220K views up to this point. He states, "I wish I never saw the trailer," with a crying face. And these
not
are
an
some
endorsement,
of the responses.
not a ringing endorsement there.
Yeah, it's not good, and that's a lot. That's a lot of eyes on this, right? That has a lot of eyes looking at this trailer and being like, "Oh no, this is going to not be good." So Marcellus at Marcellus Howard states, "Looks like a mobile game." 68 likes. Christopher London states, "Bro, worse." A bunch of likes to that one. Mike states, "Hot garbage. Couldn't get an old NBA Street dev on this." I don't think he read the article, but yeah, hot garbage.
Well, to that point, I believe an artist who worked on NBA Street is on the project, but not necessarily some of the main developers.
Right. That's also true. AC at Story Finisher states, "It was a huge disappointment." HTB, another big creator, states, "Yeah, they can keep that." Dr. Marmaduke states, "It's actually a Wii U game." There's a couple other people saying things like, "We got to support the smaller studios, the smaller developers, etc." But nobody's complimenting the gameplay.
That's
right?
the thing. And that's the point.
Other,
we need to support these games, but it's hard when they're not really bringing it. They're not impressing.
Yeah, MBG X Famo states, "They got some work to do," with a crying face. Kiana Thomas states, "NBA Infinite 2.0. SZ has one new map, states, "Hopefully they polish gameplay and animation some more because it looks pretty clunky." Mel LFC states, "Bro, I waited so long for a street ball game. Is this what you put out?" Iman Hits, "Hopefully they don't drop this game and change their mind," with a laughing face. Yeah, so I could go on and on. But the point is that is not a good look. And in my opinion, if I was somebody who worked on this game, I would be able to easily see that these animations don't look good, right? That it's unacceptable. I think this would have not looked good or been acceptable back in the mid-2000s, right? Just like it wasn't with NBA Live 07 for Xbox 360, which ended up getting canceled for the PS3 because it was so bad. Right. So again, they have time to fix these things, but that wasn't a good start, in my opinion.
No, the comparisons to really outdated games, to mobile games, not at all positive, not what you want to hear when you drop that teaser trailer. And I know that I said that a potential negative about the price point, that I was kind of crossing it off my list. I will kind of still cross it off my list, but to your point, looking cheap, yet potentially overpriced, that is an issue, especially if it remains online only. It could be very overpriced for that, and that lack of content, that lack of modes. So yeah, I guess that is still a potential concern, but the fact that they aren't going to be charging AAA price for it, that does kind of alleviate that concern a little bit, but it definitely could still look cheap and be overpriced for what they're delivering.
Yeah, exactly. And I also want to point out that there are some positive comments under like NBA The Run's official announcement. The point is that there's also, quite a few comments when you get a little bit lower on the thread that are very similar to the other one. Something like, from Akash, this looks like absolute garbage. Look at those animations. Back to the drawing board. Update the movement, update the graphics, then let's talk streets, blah, blah, blah. So, I do hope that this game rocks, right? I hope that they fix up those animations, and I hope that things smooth out. They have time. I hope they're really listening to people's feedback. I hope that the critiques, whether they're executed in good nature or not, are being listened to. I hope that they see a tweet like that from somebody with about 500K followers crapping on the trailer and saying that, it looks really bad. And then all the comments underneath, I hope that they take that to heart and, like they said in that article, makes them go back to the drawing board and rethink certain aspects of the game, especially as it relates to the player movement. To me, the graphics look great, right?
Yeah, the cel shaded look, everything, yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I love the way the game looks, but nothing is more important than gameplay. You want to get people on the sticks. You want to get people showing off that footage. You want people, hyping up the game and all of that stuff, like really hyping up the game, not paid to hype up the game. You got to bring it with the gameplay. And that's why NBA Street Volume 2 was so popular and so good, and the original NBA Street game, but specifically NBA Street Volume 2, is, man, graphics were still good for the time, but nothing beats that gameplay, Andrew. That gameplay on NBA Street Volume 2 is so damn good. And even today, you pick it up and you play it, and you can get lost in it. And so hopefully they're looking at this feedback. So, Andrew, before I get to the community's responses, what else did you have for negatives?
Well, there is a comment that I want to highlight here from the post that Michael Young made for the PlayStation blog, and it's about the whole nostalgic remakes situation. And under the subheading of the next evolution, he said, "We absolutely love the arcade classics, they were our touchstones, but we didn't want just another nostalgic remake, we wanted to build something new, an arcade-style basketball experience for today's players." And on the surface, that makes sense. You do want to modernize these concepts, you don't want to just remake what's been done before, especially if it's done poorly, or if it's bringing some of the old problems into the modern day. This was the issue with the 2010 reboot of NBA Jam, as we talked about before, Derek, and as I noted in my retrospective a couple of years ago, that it replicated the original NBA Jam too faithfully in some aspects, and in doing so, imported some of the old issues into the new game. And that is something that they really improved upon with NBA Jam on Fire Edition, which was most welcome, obviously. So there is logic in that. But there are also a few problems as well. First of all, this is a style of game that hasn't been in vogue for over a decade now. The nostalgic crowd is one that you should keep in mind. Also, whenever developers say they don't want to remake games, they want to try something new, so often they get the formula wrong. And I alluded to this before. They ignore what made the original games work, they try and change up the formula in ill-advised ways, they don't look at the basic building blocks that made the original game successful, they try to reinvent the wheel. In fact, the analogy I made in our Discord and the forum was, old cars, they had round wheels, but we've got a bold new vision, triangular wheels. And sometimes there's a reason that certain things were done a certain way, and you don't want to reimagine them. You may certainly want to refine them, but not change them unnecessarily. So that is a concern. Whenever developers say that, that sends up a red flag for me. So maybe that's just me being paranoid, maybe that's me reading too much into it, but that is something that comes to mind for me.
I also want to point out that when the game gets released and people get their hands on the sticks and they find out that it's clunky, that it's not as enjoyable, that it's not as well made as a game that came out over 2 decades ago, that's a really bad look.
Yes.
Right. So when they're doing that and stating, well, we want to do something new, this game is outdated, all of that stuff. And then when a game is released, the animation quality is worse. People get on the sticks and it's like, man, this is clunky, this isn't as fun, it's not as reactive, it's not as fast, all of that stuff. It's a really bad look. So I hate when comments like that are made.
Oh, for sure. Like we said, you don't want to be worse than a 30-year-old game. You don't want to be compared negatively to a 30-plus-year-old game. Absolutely. Like we said, online only is a huge bummer. And it goes back to those comments about making it for quote-unquote today's players and appealing to modern trends, etc., which obviously you need to do. That is smart. Once again, don't just poorly remake an old game and not think about modern mechanics. You know, we talked about Hoopland, combining the old and the new so beautifully, and basketball classics, and all of those indie basketball games that we feel are doing that. But here's the thing. Solo and couch co-op and couch head-to-head is still a thing, and that is evident from the people who are asking for it, vocally asking for it, Derek. So they're kind of focusing on only one portion of today's players and assuming, oh, it's all about the online scene these days. And yes, the online scene is important, certainly more important than it was years ago, but it's not the only way to play. It's not the only way people are playing today. And you do need to have that content, especially if you are charging a little bit more for it.
There are millions of people, Andrew, millions of people that don't want to get online and play. Not only that, I want to point this out. It's not being released with local multiplayer or local single player. And there's a lot of people out there, whether it's an only child or maybe siblings that, would rather play solo, parents out there, all of that stuff, adults of all ages, etc., that just want to jump on and have a local single player experience, right? Either through a campaign mode or jumping on for a quick game, all of that stuff. Maybe they want to unlock stuff. They are missing out on millions of potential consumers by not having local play at all on release date. I also want to remind maybe the developers, but also maybe some of our listeners who haven't given this thought. Not only is it the young crowd also that likes to play local on these games, but the older crowd, the 30s and 40s and whatnot, we grew up on video games, right? So that crowd, a lot of that crowd still likes to play video games. And, there's people that are my age that I go play pickup basketball with that every Saturday that still play NBA 2K and still play some of the classics and whatnot. They're missing out on all of those people by just targeting children and teens and maybe the young adult demographic who want to play online. I just think it's a huge misstep.
Oh yeah, they're really ignoring a key demographic there. And I know it's an arcade game and it's supposed to be for the casual audience as much as big basketball fans and have that wide net and be pick up and play regardless if you know NBA basketball, if you know deep basketball strategy, whatever. Arcade games are supposed to be simplified in that way. But basketball gamers, basketball fans are still going to be interested in this game. It's still part of the demographic, and they know about the history of basketball gaming. They know what makes basketball games fun and great, so you can't dismiss them as a demographic. And again, this genre is old. It hasn't been in vogue for quite a while, so nostalgia is not something to dismiss. And I know they're not completely dismissing nostalgia, especially when they're bringing back Pepito Garcia, so they're certainly banking on some nostalgia here, but you can't dismiss it completely. And to that point, it reminds me of Live 18 and 19 under a former Madden developer trying for that, quote, new, younger demographic. And how did that work out, Derek?
Yeah, and that didn't work out well for NBA Live 19 at all with the way they constructed the one. And, they had this like 13 or 14-year-old screaming after you made a play or won a game or something like that. And it was very clear that their focus was on that demographic and almost that demographic alone as far as the way the game was made. And presentation, and they forewent a lot of the depth that they had even in games, going back to like NBA Live 2000, right? NBA Live 2003, NBA Live 2004. How do you release NBA Live 19 with overall less depth, less legends, all of that stuff, less engaging modes overall than the game that came out over a decade earlier. So, I don't think that worked out for them.
Exactly. And finally, while all of those are concerns, the biggest thing is the fact that the teaser trailer didn't really impress. Didn't look that great. I mean, the players look fantastic, the art style looks great, but in motion, the gameplay, what we saw, supposedly highlights, supposedly a teaser to hype us up, didn't really impress. And they were talking in the blogs and the other interviews about great animations and feeling buttery smooth on the sticks, and I just don't see it. What they were talking about in those blogs and interviews wasn't lining up with what we saw in the teaser trailer. And look, they do have time to polish the game. Like you say, coming out in 2026 could mean this time next year. It doesn't necessarily mean early 2026. So they could have upwards of another year or so to work on it. And of course, post-release patches as well, because that is a thing in 2025, and it will be in 2026. We can be sure of that. But the fact that they didn't make that great first impression, the fact that the trailer left us all thinking, this doesn't look as good as we were hoping, that is the biggest issue. Because yes, it is a concern, the nostalgia stuff, and are they going to have the right approach to the mechanics and the core gameplay design principles that made NBA Street so fantastic? Are they going to throw out the good ideas and try and replace them with bad ones? That is a concern, but that is something we can only speculate on as we read into comments about nostalgic remakes and so forth. What we do have is a teaser trailer that didn't look as good as we wanted. So that is really the biggest issue here.
Me, the animations look very Live 07 for the 360, and that's not good.
No.
The animations overall look quite a bit inferior to the original NBA Street and NBA Street Volume 2, games that came out over 20 years ago. So, I just want to point that out there, and that's what most of the negative reaction, in fact, I would say all of it, really, as it relates to the trailer, that's what it's reflecting.
Oh yeah, well it's not like people are saying, oh, we don't want a new game, we only want NBA 2K. There is interest in this game. It's disappointment that this new game doesn't look as good as they wanted to.
The last thing I want to say about the footage is, and I alluded to this earlier, I would never have released this trailer in this state. And I question sometimes how the developers don't see stuff like this. I don't understand how they put the trailer together, saw that weird alley-oop animation from Doncic, the strange ball physics that accompanied it, the rocket dunks that look like they come from a game, about 30 years ago, the really awkward, stiff movement and dribbling. I don't understand how they put that trailer together, released it, and thought that they were going to get a good reaction from it, right? That's just the disconnect that I have. I understand they probably wanted to put something out. I don't know if they were on a timeline for that, where it's like, hey, we don't want to announce this at this time, or please announce this at this time. But I think that they could have done better. I feel like they should have developed the game a bit more, ironed out some of those kinks before they showed it off to the world.
Agreed. They kind of killed some of the hype there.
So let's get to the community responses to this week's community question. I asked, NBA The Run is a new NBA 3v3 arcade-style hoops game that is hitting the virtual hardwood in 2026 for PS5, Xbox X and S, and Steam. What is your excitement level, and what are your thoughts on the trailer footage? I also noted it's being released as an online-only game without local multiplayer, but it could be a future ad. So Andrew, at Andrew the X, states, it's not NBA Jam, and I'm not interested in online-only game, so no excitement. I've got Playgrounds 2 to play portably if I feel like playing arcade b-ball titles, which isn't often. Wish any version of NBA Jam had have come out on last gen. Regarding the trailer, the ball physics on passes trigger me. Yeah, it looks really poor on the trailer. I also want to point out that where NBA Playgrounds and NBA 2K Playgrounds 2, where they did it right, is there is that offline component. And, you can play multiplayer. You have, in the original Playgrounds, you have the, the story mode where you travel around and play games. And in 2K Playgrounds 2, you can play a playoff, all of that. You can play locally with a family member or co-op. You can use your unlockable players locally, etc. Yeah, they did that part right.
Absolutely. You need that component. You need to appeal to everyone. It's not just about online gaming. It is big, obviously, online gaming these days, but there is still that interest in single-player campaigns, in couch co-op, in couch head-to-head, just once-off head-to-head games online as well, not just campaigns. So yeah, big mistake there. And to the point of the animations, once again, it's not a good sign when the effects on the chicken getting hit and the feathers flying off the chicken look better than the basketball.
Stephen at the Live King states gameplay animations looked kind of weird, not only in the trailer, but the BTS footage they showed, so I'm kind of skeptical. I'll buy it anyway. They did say local was in the works, so hopefully it's there at launch. VF Baller states, there's absolutely no reason for this game to be online only. And I completely, 100% agree with VF Baller. T Gentry at Bucky_T states, I'm excited because it's been long since we've gotten another game of this type of hype in this space. And he continues, it's hard to throw judgment on the game before I play it, but call me crazy, but Streets Volume 2 looked better. Frame rates in this trailer looked a little off. Again, people stating that a game looked better that came out over 20 years ago. That's so Rel at _Relhouse states, I'm very happy to see an NBA Streets type basketball game, but I need to see more in the future. But this game is needed because of 2K fatigue. We need more competition in all genres of games in general. And I agree, I want to see more basketball games in the space, but I also don't want to see basketball games that are incomplete or not that fun on the sticks or are missing key depth or modes that a game should have today and that some games had decades ago.
Going to steal a point that I will return to when we give our final thoughts as we wrap up the episode, but even if this doesn't turn out well, and I hope it does, I'd rather see more games try and be mediocre or even flops than have no other basketball games in the space. I'd rather people try.
I agree, but it's getting old how many basketball titles have been released that are underwhelming.
True.
Over the last decade, to be completely honest with you, where developers are consistently missing the mark. They're not giving the games the depth. They don't understand their audience. They're tuning out criticisms, all of that stuff. I'm very skeptical about any of these new games.
Oh, well, there is that
are hitting the basketball gaming space.
There is that, and you're right. But I'd still rather see companies throwing their hat into the ring, indie developers giving it a go, especially since the NBA license apparently is up for grabs, and apparently is attainable for a smaller studio.
Yeah.
You know, I'd much rather them give it a go than not. But yeah, I see your point that we have had too many mediocre or disappointing games, a whole generation of NBA lives that, even though I've warmed up to more, and I do think there are some good things in those 8th Gen NBA lives that kind of flew under the radar, especially going back and playing them, but they didn't do a good enough job. They didn't close the gap enough on 2K. They didn't close the gap enough on previous generations of NBA Live that were better, which again goes back to the point, you can't make a game that looks worse than games that came out 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So yeah, that is a great point that we can't have too many mediocre games because we have seen a few too many of them, or games that just didn't live up to the hype. But I am glad to see new games, so I get where he's coming from there.
Snake at Snake 2022 states, just cool to see the NBA stars somewhere else. Can't believe I'm saying this. Yeah, he wants to see that competition in the space. Russ Abrams at Big R1028 states, looks great, just wish there was a single player mode. Again, he wants that local play. Sir Jam at SirJam34, online only. I'll pass. They're missing a lot of people, Andrew, by making this, or at least announcing it in the interim as an online-only game. Royce at RoyceBrink14 states, excitement level is high, say 9 or 10 out of 10. Trailer footage is good. Not a big fan of the sweatshirt or hoodie under jersey look. Either go all out with full uniforms or street clothes. I don't like the online only and hope for an offline or local multiplayer option. And I know that Royce would spend a lot more time on this game if it had local play. He continues, I also feel online only could stick you with 2 other players who hog the ball or 1 player who dribbles the air out of the ball, in the words of KG. I would like to see a roster of legends if they will include WNBA players and court selection screens like Street Volume 2. And lastly, he states, I also hope this doesn't wind up like that game 3-on-3 freestyle, which was not good to say the least about it. Yes, add a single player mode and the ability to play offline. And I do want to point out that that's another decent comparison, that the animations look kind of similar in ways to the 3-on-3 freestyle rebound game that's on Steam, and in some places worse. So, yeah, that's a decent comparison from Royce.
And I know that Royce is a big fan of the Legend Showcase DLC for NBA 2K12. Shout out again to Royce for letting me know about the Game of the Year edition of NBA 2K12 that I'd forgotten about. Does have that DLC included on the disc, so I was able to pick that up for my collection. finally get my hands on that DLC that I thought was long lost. So that was some great news. But I know he's a big fan of that presentation, that cel-shaded look, and it is a cool look. That is one thing about the game that we can all agree on, I think, that it does have that great aesthetic, but when it's in motion, maybe a different story.
Moving over to Discord, ZCB44 states, I might give it a try, but it being online exclusive at launch with no clear promise of offline modes makes it nearly dead on arrival for me, unfortunately. Same here, by the way, Andrew. He continues, and that's before getting into any gameplay talk, which doesn't exactly look super great, does it? So personally, it's a bummer for me. QB1120 states, I'm still a bit excited for it because it's the biggest non-2K release since the original Playgrounds. And even that game became affiliated with 2K eventually. It was fun at first, but had its issues. Street 2 is one of my all-time favorite games, so anything remotely close is worth a try. Again, what we talked about, it's going to get compared, right, to Street 2. Matty A states he refuses to play online. He doesn't want to play online, so that game is also going to be dead on arrival for him. Some excitement for the fact that this game is being released, that it's being worked on, that it's talking about being a NBA Street style game. But again, negative comments towards the trailer, negative comments towards the whole online only piece, etc.
It's a recurring theme. It's how we feel as well. And I do think they have underestimated how many people are not just about the online scene, just saying this is how people play games these days. It's not the only way people play games these days. There are a lot of single-player games. How long have they said, single-player, it's going the way of the dodo, Derek? Single-player games are dead. And yet there are so many single-player games that are doing well, that people are really enjoying. And certainly when it comes to sports games, arcade or sim, you do need to have those different experiences. The solo play, the co-op play, the head-to-head, the online. It's all important. So I really do think that they've only focused on one part of the demographic that feels modern, that feels new. This is something they weren't doing back then, but they still need to do some of the stuff they did back then today.
100% agree. So I believe we also received responses on Facebook.
Yeah, we actually have responses on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Threads this week, Derek. People responding on all platforms, which is wonderful to see. First of all, on Facebook, CF Fish says, I'm excited to give this a shot, gives me Street vibes. And obviously it does pay homage to NBA Street, and that was a good move because there's a lot of nostalgia there. But to that point, Derek, it is important to cater to that nostalgia, at least to some extent.
Well, give him this. It is NBA players on a street court. I will give him that.
Tim at Exia Ross on Blue Sky says, not going to lie, this isn't encouraging. Was much more hype for the college games. There's now basically going to just be 2K DLC. And of course, that was certainly not what we were hoping for when it comes to the college games, Derek. But unfortunately, I think this teaser trailer may have done more harm than good.
Yeah, I like I said, I wouldn't even have released this. I don't understand how developers, put that footage together and thought that it would be passable or thought that they were going to get a positive reaction. That part blows my mind because to me, it's very obvious that footage wasn't going to be received well.
And finally, Damn It Pops on Threads says they just need to reprise NBA Street, not really interested in anything else. And yeah, that's another issue here, Derek, that some people do want that continuation of the old series. They don't want a spiritual successor. They want EA Sports with those resources, with that style, to bring back NBA Street. And we've talked about that before, and NBA Jam, and NBA Live, of course, and they just announced that the NBA Live 19 servers are shutting down next January, Derek, so looks like the NBA Live series, in a way, is going to officially come to an end, apart from mobile. And of course, NBA Live 19 is already the last release in the series, so the series has kind of already ended, but it does feel a bit more official, a final nail in the coffin, if you will. But some people do want those games to come back, rather than the spiritual successor.
Yeah, and when people say something like that, they're not even talking about the graphics most of the time. Sometimes they're not even talking as much about the depth. They're talking about the way the game played. Right? How it felt on the sticks. I can't stand seeing some of these newer games where it's like, oh, look at our flashy graphics. Oh, look, he's wearing the right shoes, or like his cyberface looks great. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And then the gameplay is just downright not impressive. It's like you got this backwards, right? If the graphics looked okay, but the gameplay showed as smooth and fun and engaging and everything, the reception would be far greater to that early footage. But they got it backwards. Like in this case, the graphics look great, but the gameplay looks incredibly underwhelming, which is why you got that negative reaction.
Fantastic gameplay can make up for outdated graphics, old school graphics, even subpar graphics. But great graphics cannot make up for subpar gameplay.
So yeah, thank you to everybody who responded to this week's mailbag. A lot of great responses. A lot of good feedback. I'm going to give my final verdict on this. When I heard that this game was announced, when I saw that tweet, when I saw that they got the NBA license, I was pretty excited. However, because of my experience with NBA Superstars from Raw Thrills, and just some of the recent games that tried to enter this space that were just so underwhelming from a gameplay perspective, once I saw the trailer, once I saw those animations, once I saw how it kind of looked like NBA Live 07 for the 360, once I saw how the animations looked, inferior to a game that came out, a couple decades ago, my excitement went to worry. And then when I found out that it was in talks to be released as an online-only game, my excitement plummeted to, would I even play this game or entertain trying this game? And then I thought about everybody that I know who wants to play local, whether it's, in real life or people that I know on social media, people like VF Baller and Bucky T and so many of our listeners and Royce and all of that. Yeah, it was a bummer to me. I like the idea of the game. They got plenty of time to work on those animations and smooth things out and make the players less stiff and make better ball physics and all of that stuff. They're not in a crunch, right, as it relates to time. So I am hopeful there and optimistic. But if any of the developers are listening to this podcast, read the room, look at the comments that we talked about, look at those tweets that talk about how it showed poorly. Listen to that feedback, whether it's aggressive or constructive, and take that to heart, because if you want your game to be a home run, if you want it to do incredibly well, you got to listen to people. And hopefully they reconsider the offline piece, and allow for local single player and local multiplayer, because I think that would go a long way with people. So am I excited for the game? Not really. I'm actually more worried about a game like this hitting the space and not being in good shape and not being what people want, and just another setback in the basketball video game space. But I admire the team for working on it. I think it's excellent that there are small development teams out there that are trying to enter the basketball video game space with the NBA license or without. And we do want to see these types of games in the space. I just think that there's been quite a few missteps already as it relates to the announcement and the footage that we've seen.
I completely agree. We're on the same page with this one. I want to be optimistic. I want to get excited, but it is tough considering there are some key negatives that jump out. My trepidation is not being stuck in the past and saying, everything has to be as it was, and comparing everything to old games. Although, when those old games are the yardstick, when they are the gold standard in the genre, that is inevitable. You do need to surpass, or at least equal, those games. But with that being said, that is not me trying to be cranky and stuck in the past. But I do recognise the red flags from previous attempts. Like you said, there have been quite a few mediocre releases that have ignored important feedback, have ignored pitfalls that previous games have fallen victim to, and they've made those mistakes, or they've made poor changes. So we've seen this happen, and we don't want these games to fail. We want them to be as good as they possibly can be. We want them to be fun. We want to enjoy them. So when we see red flags, we're going to point it out. That's all this is. With that being said, I do hope that I'm wrong about some of my concerns. I hope that they do pull it together and that they can polish the game and that it does succeed. Like I said, I'd much rather games try and be mediocre or flop than not have them at all. That is not ideal, obviously, but I'd still rather see more games in the space than 2K being able to thump their chest and say, we are the exclusive home of basketball gaming. That can't be the case. We've seen what monopolies do with the Madden series. We've seen what's happened with a virtual monopoly with a virtual hardwood. Obviously, 2K does not have an exclusive NBA license, but they have essentially had a monopoly in the space with the lack of competition. It's not been good, so we don't want to see that. The developers do sound passionate. It sounds like they're in a great situation as far as not having suits breathing down their neck and stifling the creativity and making the games greedy and less fun as a result. We do want to see that passion and creativity in games. We don't want to see uninspired titles that are just trying to milk gamers for recurrent revenue. It's also great news that the NBA license is clearly attainable for smaller studios and indie developers. Once again, we don't want 2K to be the exclusive home of basketball gaming, so that is good news. Also kind of confirms that deals take the situation into account. 2K being more profitable, they have that bigger deal, but it doesn't price other studios out of that license, so that is good news. And once again, it's a new basketball video game. It's something to look forward to, talk about, and to eventually check out. So, yeah, we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to try and remain optimistic. There are some red flags, unfortunately, but I'm glad that it's happening.
We're also looking for playtesters, so if you want to jump on that, let them know. They announced on their Twitter handle, and they showed you the way to sign up. So just a heads up there.
But with that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Both we and the NLSC are on social media, so Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep a look to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.